And hello everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford. I am the creator of ComicBase and also had a hand in Atomic Avenue and various other things going on around the scenes. Anyway, hope you're all doing well and hope you all can hear me this time. That was an all-time low last time as far as the sound goes. I did check levels about 6 times before this one, but hopefully it's all coming in good for you guys. Anyway, got a reasonable amount to talk about today, but I still want to hit as many of your questions as possible. But before we get into it, I would need to do the YouTuber thing and say hit the like and subscribe button on the YouTube console there when you're watching it. It does help us get the notifications out to the rest of the folks who are on the list. At any given moment, there is however many hundred folks are subscribed to the channel, and some dozens of people will actually be notified that this thing is happening, unless there's a fair amount of activity right at the start of the whole thing. At least that is my understanding from the lore of how anyone thinks at the moment how the algorithm works. Anyway, let's do a quick check of the chat, because this is a really good time to find out whether or not my mic is broken after all. Hail Greg, this week's I got my copies of Mark Schultz's Carbon 4 from Flesk, along with their Al Williamson art book. Sweet, very nice. I actually wanted to talk about Kickstarter type things later on in the show. A lot of action going on that, and I want to talk about Richard Scott. Oh man, car accident. That sounds awful. I hope you feel better, man. That sounds rotten. All right, hail Oro, hail Mike. Hey, nice to hear from you over in Vancouver. And let's see here. Greg says, "Hi, PA. Truth that if there are technical glitches in the live stream this week, we'll be sending all of us free copy of Youngblood #1." Yeah, no, that's not a thing. I actually do not have any single comic book, including Youngblood #1, that I have so many copies of it that I can afford to give them out to just everyone. But if we have Free Comic Book Day this year, which now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm thinking isn't looking great, because otherwise, I normally at this time of the year, I'm sitting on just piles and piles and piles of Free Comic Book Day covers. Comics that have come in, and now that I say it out loud, I'm thinking, wait a minute, it's almost May. Free Comic Book Day is supposed to be in like a week, and the fact that I don't have no comics in my hands right now, either there's weird shipping going on, or have we canceled Free Comic Book Day again this year, or delayed it greatly? Ugh, I don't know, but normally those are my give outs to anyone who orders things from me on Atomic Avenue, or just that I'm ever sending packages to. I'll just wad in as many Free Comic Book Day comics as will fit in the package without increasing my mailing cost, and that's usually the thing. I hope we get this stuff together soon. I miss what little rituals we have of our comic book year. I miss them, and I want them back badly. Halloween, I think, is looking very good, but yeah, Free Comic Book Day. What's the story? All right. Jesse says, "Sounds like I'm in the bathroom." What? I don't know, man. No, I'm just right here. I'll stand a little closer to the microphone. Maybe that'll help slightly. Okay, let's see here. It says I sound a little canned. Typically, it's a function of being close to the mic. Let me know, is this a little bit better on the volume? It's, short of wearing a lav, one of the problems I dance around with the setup right here is I know that this podcast is never going to come off unless I can more or less turn a couple switches from my desk and have the whole thing work. And so one thing I can't do is I can't set up a separate desk and environment to live stream from that has really optimal mic placements and not huge numbers of monitors and other things that cause massive amounts of glare. So if you ever saw the wide view of my studio, you'd see that I'm dancing a lot of stuff around a very tight area to try to get so I can switch from my work mode to the podcast mode, very quickly. One of the things I fear that I'm compromising somewhat is mic placement, because the mic is right here at the edge of the frame. I'm about as close to it as I could afford to get, but now that someone's mentioned it, let's try this. Is that any better? I'm going to guess that is, because long story, but see if that isn't better. Anyway, Mike says, silly question about the covers. Why, Peter? Some covers demurely centered with little pink ribbons, while there are covers that be lifted right from a gynecology textbook. The answer is because we didn't see the other ones in time to censor them. Realistically, company policy is, first of all, you're not allowed to buy ComicBase unless you're an adult. That said, I don't want to cause the paint to peel off anyone's, eyes, by blasting their eyeballs with stuff that they'd rather not be looking at. So we tend to do the same thing that if you ever go to a comic show, they do with the nude art and things like that. Is we tend to do the equivalent of the little sticky pads, sticky notes. If there's an all ages show, suddenly all this nude art from Olivia and whatever else will suddenly grow little pink Post-it notes around all the naughty bits, and then if it's not an all ages show, like it's a dealer show, suddenly all those Post-it notes vanish. I don't have the ability to do two versions of all the artwork, sadly. And yes, that is a fairly well requested feature. But one thing I do have, and now I'm looking at my levels. I'm probably a little hot now. Let me check. How is sound? Sounds a ton better. Way better. Excellent. Sweet. Okay. No, okay. Anyway. One thing I'm cognizant of is they are going to come up in the screensaver, and I don't want to have things come up in the screensaver, especially if they're not on a mature title, an otherwise mature title. I don't want them to come up there in a way that's going to get people just, I don't want to burn your eyeballs out. That said, we do get picture submissions that, unless there is a previous picture that we're replacing or, something else like that, that we may never actually open up the image and stare at it before it gets put into the pipeline. I mean, if you're coming from a known person that we know who you are and you're sending us stuff and you sent this data along and things like that, and it's a picture we've never seen before, we don't necessarily go open that picture up, say, yep, that's a thing, and then go on to the next one before it goes out into the world. Now, if there's ever two covers and we need to sort between them, then we're looking at one, or the A cover, the B cover, and say, well, which one do we want? At that point, then we're like, oh, wait a minute, more is showing there than we want, in which case we flag it over to the art department and we say, hey, we got some work for you. And definitely before we do big releases, we... there are whole days wasted where the art department is going through the whole publisher catalogs of certain publishers and saying, all right, pull up every dang picture from these guys and make sure that all the really, heavy stuff is red ribboned. It's our artful way of covering up the naughty bits. That's official policy. That said, we don't always catch them all. If there are ones that you feel like we ought to catch, bring them to our attention. We'll get them for next time out. If there is something that you wish we hadn't caught, keep your mouth shut, and we won't know. Or if you tell it, don't replace pictures. If you've got the image you want and you don't want to replace, just tell it not to replace pictures, and then we'll leave your image the heck alone. But anyway, that's the problem we're caught with. Again, for the 733,000 pictures that we're currently managing, I don't want to try to managing a separate alternate library, which is the same thing with, ribbon or no ribbon. I have enough problems in my life. So anyway, we're doing the best we can on that. Okay, so who uses screensavers nowadays? Dude, have you not checked out the screensaver? As Agent DeCamp, have you not checked out the screensaver that comes with the new ComicBase Archive Edition? It is the bomb. I think you would really dig it. Because what it does, especially if you have a multiple monitor setup, is it just gives you like the world of comics or books or magazines. It's just cover after cover after cover after cover, and for me, it just reinforces how much really cool stuff there is out there in the world. And you see crazy Italian, sci-fi and French fantasy novels and things like that, and just you'd have no idea there's so much neat stuff out there in the comic world. And so even if I'm just having it whip through like Time Life covers or something, it's just fascinating to me. But have a look at it if you haven't before. It's a feature. It's new in the Archive Edition. I think it was new this year, or I know at the very least it was new in 2020. But it's called the ComicBase Cover Gallery screensaver. It's installed automatically with the Archive Edition, and it will automatically use whatever whatever your picture settings are. But have a look at that one. I think you'll think it's pretty cool. All right. Yeah, and Mike says screensaver is great. I have 3D monitors from VGA to 4K, and the CB screensaver is great. Yeah, I confession, I actually have a little video monitor, a video assist monitor I'm running on right now. I kind of peek down periodically and see, what's the on-air signal look like, and that thing becomes a third or fourth monitor when my other thing is going on there. And sometimes I'll be sitting around, just chatting with my wife and everything, and the screensaver will kick on, and you're just watching 4 monitors do this whole thing, and it's just nifty. All right. Let's see here. Lance says, do you have a standard pink ribbon graphic users can apply to those image uploads that need censoring? Great idea. I will talk to the art folks and ask if we can't put that one out as a show link. There's another thing I want to put out, I'm going to talk about in a moment as a show resource. I think we have some things that we should be posting on as links to the forum as just resources for the community. I think they'll be pretty cool. All right, let's see here. Pete, can you go over how to use the collection value graph and its features? I'm getting some wacky graphs that don't make sense. Yeah, sure. Let me hit that one in a minute because I want to talk. ERB. I want to talk about that one in the context of the Golden Age stuff, because I'm going to be showing a lot of graphs in a minute, and that I think would be a great time to talk about that. Yes, do I need a lot of pink ribbons for French fantasy novels? Ooh la la, that is so true. Yes, sometimes when our editors are feeling like really, really artsy, they'll actually try to match the ribbon color to the general graphic. More often, they're just trying to get coverage. All right, so other things going on in the world. So as I mentioned, mere moments before we went live, I posted, it'll wind up being this week's update or at least one of this week's updates. That just got posted to everybody just moments ago. Major features of this update, one is thousands and thousands of new issues. Magazines, pictures, and so forth. It's a very heavy picture load if you're downloading pictures and so forth. That's part of it. And the other one is if you have Golden Age stuff, prepare for some shocks when you're looking at your collection statistics. And what that's on the back of is there have been some just astonishing auction results that don't appear to be one-offs. Over the last 3-4 months, man, I've never seen the comic market like this before. I've been looking at the real estate market because I had this dream of having a place down in Florida that I could maybe have a beach house down on, or rent it out in the off season or do something like that, but actually have a little getaway someplace during COVID lockdown mode. And I'm just watching the graphs of the real estate down everywhere along the Gulf Coast, and it's just doing this. It's things are just doubled or tripled in price in the last 4 or 5 years. It's just nuts, and it's along the entire coastline, to the point where it's like, dang man, we had a good year, but I mean, you just feel stupid, even wanting to think about paying this kind of money. I thought real estate was bad, and I'm seeing the same thing everywhere in real estate. I'm also seeing the same thing in the Golden Age issue market. I posted it in the show links right now, a couple of articles to it. The second one is actually the misleading one. It's from, I believe, Bounding Into Comics. They're talking about an astonishing $1.2 million paid for in a CGC 8.0, which is just a fine copy of Batman #1. As all you guys would know, Batman #1. I'm seeing if I can pull up the article here. Give me just a moment. One of the things you'd think I'd be easily able to do if I just posted it. Yeah, here we go. Let me put this on the other monitor. And let's go picture in picture here so we can kind of keep continuity of thought. Possibly. Okay, yeah, that works. Let me go with the second article first. This guy right here, yes. So, Batman #1 sells for $1.2 million at auction, a new record, as claimed by Rich Johnston in Bleeding Cool. Bleeding Cool, not Bounding Into Comics. And I'm sure that is a record for a CGC 8.5. Now, if you haven't updated your comic base, we had, I want to say Batman #1, I want to say it was going for like 700K and change beforehand. My rule, as ever, on on everything is basically market price wins over ideology. So I might think that this is too high a price, too low a price, whatever else, but if the market is saying that's the price, you're an idiot if you argue with it. Now, there are such things as flukes, right? There are just, especially when you have weird multipliers in effect, like somebody really got out their wallet for like a shot to hell, ripped up copy of something. You don't want to then multiply that by 50 to get from the fair price to the near mint price. You don't want to multiply that by 50 and say, well, that's clearly the near mint price is worth 50 times whatever this guy dug deep for. No, that one's just a fluke. But when you're talking about comics that come up once in a blue moon, and when they do, they make a lot of noise. Action #1, Batman #1, Marvel Comics #1, things like that. When those things come up for auction, you got to pay a lot of attention to the auction price on it. And at that point, if that's going to be one of 3 sales of this book in the next 3-4 years, whatever it just sold for is the price. I mean, there's no mitigating that one. Now, you may have down market sales in different conditions that modify the price slightly, but the high market big auction changes have to be allowed to change the price of the book in a big way if that's what the market is saying for those books. And that's how I remember originally just being absolutely shocked when Action Comics #1 went for like $2 million. When it was I want to say it was right around the time that Nick Cage sold his copy off to I forgot who got it, but it was also like, I think there was a $2 million baseball sale during the Home Run Derby, back a while ago with Barry Bonds and so forth. But anyway, those things instantly set the market price. Batman #1 selling for $1.2 million. Okay, so if near mint it was pegged at $770,000, an 8.0 copy going for $1.2 million suddenly starts saying, well, wait a minute, that tells me that the near mint price is going to be north of $2 million on that same book. And interestingly enough, and this is a very strange way of reporting the news to me, the 8.0 copy at $1.2 million was considered a record, but it's exactly in line with an auction result which we hadn't been super quick to jump on ahead of time, which was a Batman #1 in 9.4 sold on Heritage Auctions for $2.2 million. At the time, I think we were sitting there going like, I don't know. It's like we sort of twiddled our fingers a little bit, wondering what to make of it, because there were some down market sales that were not quite as strong on that one. And we thought, well, maybe it's just a jackpot thing. We maybe we should go a little slow on updating the price on that one. We're seeing sustained action on that one for exactly in that range. As a result, if you've downloaded the most recent ComicBase price update, you're going to see that Batman #1 has a valuation of about $2.2 million in the database now. Similarly, Action Comics #1 had been pegged out at about $2 million, 2.2 maybe. Comic Connect just moved one for 3.25. That one is an outlier. I mean, it is definitely heavier than other sales have gone for. This 9.0 that sold on eBay for $3.2 million, much more in line. But strangely enough, Action Comics #1, you've got like 5 sales of it in the same month. You've got a 9.0 on Comic Connect for $2.1 million back 5 months ago. You've got a $3.25 million on Comic Connect, an 8.5 for $2 million. You've got a 8.5 on Comic Connect for $1.5 million. I mean, the variance on this is nuts, but it's all still much higher than we'd had the book at before. As a result, I want to say Action Comics #1 has got a theoretical near mint price in the database right around $3 million. I forget the change after that one, but that one took a huge jump this last time out as well. Marvel Comics #1, 9.4 sale on Heritage Auctions. I want to say it was going for $250,000 or $300,000 or so beforehand. It's now right up at $1.26 million. Batman #1, famous as you guys probably know as not the first appearance of Batman, first appearance of the Joker on the other hand, and the first appearance of the titular character in his own title. but that one's getting a lot of action. Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man. That one is a bit of a jackpot, a multiplier on there. Anytime you see a comic going in better than near mint, at that point, it's not a slight increase in price from the near mint price. At that point, you're literally talking about someone who's paying to have the best known copy of a book. As opposed to what would a perfectly good newsstand near mint copy go for, which is what we're aiming for when we talk about the near mint price. But anyway, on and on and on. It's the Golden Age prices have been just psychotic lately. Include some show notes on these ones. We're getting information from Heritage along the lines, and it's not just the Golden Age keys that are doing great guns out there. You will see major adjustments to things like all winners, all select, as well as even just really pedestrian titles like the Ziff Davis run of G.I. Joe. We were getting sales data for multiple issues that was 5,000% of what was expected. And so you're going to be seeing major corrections along those whole titles as well, really just to bring them in line with what auction results are doing. So these are crazy times for the Golden Age industry, and let me check chat here just for a little bit before I get away from myself. As people circle back to that, yeah. All right, let me go back to turn that off, turn that on. We should be coming back onto full screen. All right. So. Mike says, I wonder if it's spiking because rooms of comics going all digital. I would wonder that, except I think probably the reality is, because we're seeing the same thing along a lot of investment goods. I've been looking at both residential and commercial real estate. I'm seeing valuations, not just regionally, but it's the rare region that isn't peaking. So like San Francisco is falling through the floor right now, but man, San Francisco earned that spot. Just in terms of quality of life issues and high taxes. Other places now that I've been looking at have been really having huge year-on-year spikes in the valuation of real property. I think what's really happening is, to a little bit of it, we've got a question of markets benefiting from stimulus payments. Excuse me. To the extent that there's small investors, and there's investors who are essentially investing so small that they're investing in, I think gas prices will go up or down next week, so I will either fill or not fill my tank in full this week. I mean, people do play investments that are that small and that short term. But I think what the longer term that's happening right now is I saw the graph of the balance on the if you guys know about what M1 and M2 and M3 are, but basically the money supply of what's been essentially authorized for issue, what's been sent out through the central banks, and what's been distributed through the central banks into the broader economy. Those different measures of money, the money supply in America has been jacked to high heaven. It's the M1 curve it's like it's been growing up like this, and it just in the last year it did a curve that looks like that as far as what's sitting on the Fed's balance sheet. The M2 supply is more like a 30% grade, but that is a hell of an inflationary grade. And then that over time then becomes M3, which is money in the broader economy, and that's when you start seeing that every single thing in your life costs more money. I think what's happening here is the people who've got money to invest are chasing things that they think are going to ride with the money supply. So I think you're going to see the supply of dead money, which is things like gold and precious metals. I think you'll see that those will continue to rise with expected inflation. But more importantly, live money, which is money that goes into long-term asset appreciation investments, which in this case, things like art, things like comic books, things like real estate. I think those are, basically money is absolutely going to be fleeing into those sectors. We're also expecting, and we'll probably be sitting on a pretty big financial boom for the next 6-12 months. Who, can't, timing this stuff is a dangerous game, but I think that there's a lot of pent up energy in the economy, and now that we're starting to open the doors again on the world, that people are going out there and they really want to get out. They really want to vacation. They really want to be out in the world and not just stuck in their little cubbyhole. I think you're going to see a real boom in those sorts of expenses over the next short period of time, but I think that's going to be followed behind that by inflation that probably is going to be unlike anything I've seen in my adult lifetime. I did live through the 70s, and it wasn't pretty. There's no effective cap on what inflation can be, but I'll say I've lived through years of like 12% inflation, and it's just a horrible sinking feeling, because basically what it leaves you with is that feeling that, like, wow, everything I've saved up with in my life just a few 5 years later is worth like half what it was before. It just feels like you're not getting anywhere, and that everything you've saved up is worth nothing. So best case is that you've put your money someplace where it's going to grow with you. And strangely, one of those things is comic books. Good grief, man, who knew? So that's my take, for whatever it is worth. All right. ComicBase Screensaver equals the new Tumblr. Ralph Snart #1. Wow, I can't even picture where you're going with that, Scott. All right, so let's see here. All right, lack of inventory. Yeah, part of real estate is lack of inventory, and certainly when you're talking, typically in a normal economy, what happens is that supply and demand will stabilize each other. So if there's a lot of lack of inventory, then you see a building boom, right? So people at that point then are building as fast as they can possibly get crews and cranes together, and 2-3 years later everything's normalish again. And then if there's a bit of a slump in the economy that causes people to pull back in what they feel like is their spendable money or their investable money, then those things can lie fallow, and then they become, worst case, they become blighted if it goes on a really long time. I think we're just sitting there with a lot of energy and a lot of stimulus just really raring to go, but it's chasing, there is no ability to ramp up very quickly to fulfill that demand, certainly, but and so that's why you also see even things like blank land, just land that hasn't been developed, is also gunning up in price as well. But in terms of things like comic books and stuff like that, I see it as just money's chasing investment, or I could be wrong. All right, so. And Asian Camp says, I heard Warner Brothers not going to release movies on hard copy soon. By hard copy, are you referring to as in not on disc at all? If so, that'd be, I think, a really bad move. I'm trying to think of another way to put that, because I think there's a great number of people who, even though the studios very much would like to get paid every single time you watch anything, if there's a way that they could even make a dime every time you flip through a channel and happen to land upon their movie and watch it for 10 minutes, they would, if there was some way they could always get paid whenever there was an eyeball watching their stream, that is their ideal. But I don't think it's the ideal of the consumer who likes to buy movies. I think, or for that matter, read books or do anything else. I think there's always going to be a mix of people who are like, no, darn, I want to simply own the best possible copy of this thing that I love, and I don't want to be constantly streaming it and hoping my internet connection's good and whatever else. No, I want to have that thing I love and hold it close to me, and I will pay for that privilege. And I gotta think it'd be crazy to want to give up the ability to serve those folks if they want to be served up in a way that has some persistence and some physicality to it, as opposed to purely digitally. But anyway, we'll see. How can you give the value of a comic? We'll have to get in NFTs. Yeah, good question. By the way, there is a show definitely to be had at some point in the future. I got a very interesting email from Wizard. I think they're called Wizard Editions now. But so Wizard, once upon a time, used to be a magazine. Then it was a series of conventions. Then it's I think they fancy themselves a collecting empire now. But anyway, they are trying to get their non-fungible token strategy together now, and they had lots of interesting ideas on how they were going to handle that. I'll probably share a lot more about this later, but there's definitely an interest of the kinds of people who brought us things like dynamic forces covers and and metal foil editions and things like that. The same folks are out there to try to get you to pay lots and lots of money for a digital asset, which basically amounts to you have rights to say that I am the sole and unique owner of this long hexadecimal number, which I will show you here. Now they're going to try to tie the long hexadecimal number, which is fundamentally ephemeral, to something that conjures up some kind of image of something special and unique and wonderful, whereas, a mathematician would say, well, what's more unique and wonderful than a GUID, which is to say like a 60 character hexadecimal number there's more permutations to than the atoms in the universe. I mean, what could possibly be more beautiful than that? And the answer is almost everything a human can imagine. But anyway, Wizard is trying to get a strategy going for how to take advantage of that new and emerging market, and we'll see what they do with that. There's a show to come up on that one in a bit. All right, so moving on slightly. Okay, so back in ComicBase land, there is, as I mentioned, a big update that we just posted. Let me get you the stats off that one really briefly. Come on, we got you here. Okay, so as of about an hour ago, first of all, the total value of all the comics listed in ComicBase jumped by about $4 million. We've now tracked $47.7 million worth of comic books alone. We have 730,503 pictures in the latest picture sets. The 933,000 issues, I believe that's an increase of 3,000 issues in this last week for new comics. And we're also really pounding magazines and books to the point where we actually, this would make a pretty decent sized bookstore if these were real books. It would be a magazine super center like you've never seen before. In the comic store, obviously, is getting to the point where you just couldn't put that many comics in one room. But anyway, so that's where we're at on that stuff. That is available for download right now if you like. You do need ComicBase 2.2. And to answer a tech support question from earlier on, if you are not currently using ComicBase, 21.0.2. Boy, was that confusing enough? I'll say that again. ComicBase 21.0.2. If you got a note saying that you need to update to that before you're allowed to get new content updates, the way to do it, easiest thing to do is just go in the program, say Internet, check for updates, and when it says there's a new version you want to download it, say yes, download it, double click it, it'll update your program. It takes a couple minutes, and then you're good to go. It will not affect your data. If you ever want to, though, at any point, if it points you to the registrations page on your account on comicbase.com, just go ahead and you can always just re-download the software. It'll install, if it's a newer version, it'll install and it'll update what you've got already. And at that point, really, the registrations page will always have the latest version. So when in doubt, you can always just go there to download. And that is always a good way to go and make sure you have the latest of everything. So anyway, that is the question on that. So you do need to have the latest version, ComicBase 21.0.2, and then once you have that, then you're allowed to download the latest update with all this new amazing stuff. So let me do a quick check back here, and let's see here. John P says, same here for hard copies, so I still get my CB on Blu-ray, and God bless John. All right, so other things going on in the world. Finally, at long last, we have posted the new Blu-ray pictures for the quarter. I believe there's only 730-some thousand on those. It missed the 3,000 new pictures we put up this week. But those are now available up on the update servers, and if you do want to download full disc images of all the Blu-rays, you can do that from there. And so I was asking folks, please hold off from bringing our servers to their knees until we got them staged to the content server. So we did finally get them staged to the content server, so those are up for download. And thank you for all the folks who gave us a little extra time, because we need to run one more pass of the compressor to get them to fit on the Blu-ray themselves. Other news, and I'd like to take a poll here, especially of the folks who are using the 4K Archive Edition. In the past, Well, once upon a time, when we first did the Blu-ray edition, we had a 25 gigabyte disc where we could almost do a straight copy from our master library, straight on, with the lightest of possible compression, fit the whole thing onto a single 25 gigabyte Blu-ray drive. Those days are long gone. I think back then we had 80,000 images. We now are, if we keep going the way we're going, in a year or two, we'll have 800,000 images. And we're at the point now on a 50 gig drive. I'm actually feeling like the compressed images are getting more compressed than I like. To the point where we've actually made it so that if you do download them in the program, we actually feed them up to you at a better quality than what's on the disk images. The disk images are now limited very much by what would actually fit on a real physical Blu-ray drive. I am thinking, and tell me how you all feel about this, of just basically announcing that the next version of the 4K Blu-ray Archive Edition will be 2 discs. We, I think, can do this now because we're no longer sending out quarterly update discs to everybody, because if we had to ship 2 times the discs twice a year times everybody, it would really make the product unaffordable. But I think, and it might involve an upcharge of, say maybe $10 on the whole product, but I think we can turn it from a a 46 gigabyte product into essentially a 90 gigabyte 2-disc Blu-ray product. I think we can do that one for, like I say, we'll work the numbers when it comes down to tax and shipping and everything else, but I think it can be done for, like I say, probably another $10 all in. Let me know what your reaction to that is. Would it interest you, not interest you, and so forth? I want to make sure that if you did spring for the 4K Archive Edition, and if you're getting on Blu-ray disc, if you are downloading it, if you are getting the physical copy of it, that what you're installing is up to the standards that we want to keep for those images. Because we also, as we go, not only are we having more images, but we're also getting higher resolution images all the time of even old things, and it's just, there's a physical reality that we're fighting against, where there's only so much space on the disc, and there's, you can only compress it so hard before it just starts showing artifacts that just, it sucks all the life out of the image, and you don't want that. You want to keep the quality high. Streaming services, typically we're talking about like, oh yeah, you got a 4K stream, that's awesome. But what they're not telling you is that we're doing this at 3 megabits per second or whatever else. And so yeah, you're getting like a 1080p level of bandwidth is trying to serve up what is sampled up to be a 4K image, but you're not really getting the quality you paid for, which is why when you pause the frame and you look at it, you're not really wowed by the picture so much most of the time. Whereas if you sit there with a 4K disc image, you typically are looking at it and saying, damn, those titles look sharp. So I do want to make sure that if we are even going to have a 4K Blu-ray Archive product in physical form, that we keep the quality level up there. So let me know if that's something that strikes you as about the right balance. But I'm interested in pursuing something like that because I don't think we can push much harder on the Blu-ray physical product without going to another disc and still keep the quality. So that's kind of where that one stands. All right, and Johnson, are we still getting Blu-ray sent to us? Yes, you should be getting one. I haven't sent this quarter's Blu-rays out yet. They've just been produced. Okay, and Mike says 2 discs is fine. Sweet. Okay, good to know. All right, so we are doing okay for time. Sweet. All right, so a couple things. First of all, I wanted to go over really quickly. There have been questions about how to do a couple things in ComicBase. So I wanted to hit a few of them if I could. So let's go over to here, and let's throw on the picture-in-picture. All right. Hide some of this. And first of all, let's talk about how you would do a query to find missing pictures. Now that's kind of a weird thing to look for, right? Because basically what you're looking for in that case is let's go to okay, so I'm looking for how do I find like the action adventures of John Jacobs and the Power Team number 3. Now, as we probably mentioned beforehand, the picture itself isn't stored in the database. We basically find the picture by knowing what the title is and what the issue number is, and then we say, okay, since this is issue number 2 of the Action Adventures of John Jacobs and the Power Team, it's published by John Jacobs, that's going to be kept in, and then here I'll show the directory, the, let me drag this out here. So wherever you keep your shared pictures, it's going to be under J, John Jacobs, the name of the title, and then it'll be called number2.jpg, right? Now, we don't have one for number 3, but if I wanted to get a query to show me which ones don't you have, how do I do it? Because the information, whether you've got or not, isn't actually in the database. Well, as it turns out, there is one thing that is in the database that you can check. And what that is you might have noticed that when I go to a new title, and let's go to a new one right now, if you look in this upper left-hand corner here, and you watch as it builds the thumbnails, it takes just a second, but what it does is it kind of goes down the whole list, and it builds a list of all the comics. It basically pre-computes all the thumbnails for all the images. Well, when it does that, it also says, all right, I found an image for Action Comics Canadian edition number 536. The image I'm working from is 725 by 1025 wide. It's, its file size is X amount and so forth. And it uses that information, first of all, to help populate this list very quickly, but also it uses that if you ever drag new things into the list, so it knows when things have been updated and when it needs to change stuff like that. Well, what you can do now is you can use these, and these aren't typically shown fields. You can show them if you really want under the column view, but what you would want to do is do a find and go to an advanced find. So I'm going to say find, advanced find, and now we're going to get into some of the weird stuff you can only do in ComicBase from this very user-friendly window. I mean, this is the great trade-off in almost everything, is that you can make a lot of stuff very easy to use, but unless it's fundamentally simple, it's hard to make it both easy to use and as flexible as you want. This is one of those cases where I want something that's so weird, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for me to come up with a special report that makes this super easy, but it's really powerful to be able to get to it when you need to. Here's how you would get to this information in particular. So what I'm going to do is I want to find items where, and I'm going to go to my fields here. I'm looking for, in the comic books, for comic books, I want to find it where the picture file size, well, let's say the picture height, right? All right, and which then becomes this glurp down here, which is, if you know database stuff, this is its actual name in the database. And I'm going to say is null, right? I'm literally typing the words space is space null. Now you can capitalize it, not capitalize it. That's up to you. It doesn't really matter. If I want to, I can put this in order by by titles or things like that. But for right now, let's just go ahead and pull the first 1,000 results. If I do this, what it's going to do is give me the first 1,000 items it found in the database, which we don't have pictures for. And you'll notice that none of these are coming up with pictures as I scroll through them. All right. So what I can do from there is I can then highlight the whole thing. I could print this list if I want. Better yet, I would go ahead and I would copy this list and either make a quick report out of it or export it or do something with me so I would know these are the ones I would want to go looking for. All right, now let's go back to that original find result. I'm going to go ahead and shrink down this window here so I can see two things on screen at once. All right, so one thing remember I said, you got the flexibility here, but it's not really worth us, trying to imagine every strange thing you might ever want to do with a program, like find me all the things that aren't in the pictures and make them super easy to use. Well, that's true and it's not true. So for instance, one thing I can do is once I've gone and figured out this search, I can now save this search. And let's say I'm going to call this thing missing pictures. All right, and then I just hit save. Now, go ahead and close this one. I go on and I want to do something else in my life. If I go and I want to say find all the missing pictures again, now all I got to do to get it to it again is I can either say find other, or I just go Control F, which is find. I dial down to advanced find, and then I load up my search and I load up my missing pictures. At which point find, and boom, you're good to go. I will go ahead and take this missing picture search, and I will I'll link this up on the website, and so you guys can get to that one quickly. But at some point when you feel like it, explore around with the advanced find. It's amazing some of the strange stuff you can do, which is not, not everyone needs it. But it's surprisingly powerful. So for instance, you could do things like saying, find me all the comics that have gone up by more than 20% since last year, right? Which would be another way of saying, find me all the comics where their year 4 value, their current value, is greater than their year 3 value times 1.2, right? And that would be all the comics that went up by more than 20%. Similarly, I could find all the ones that went down by, 20%. Or I could say things, find me all the ones where I've priced them too high, where the price is greater than a certain amount of the value, or I priced them too low, vice versa. You could find all the things that, were written by, Chuck Dixon, but which also fulfill some of these requirements and so forth. But you can chain together these very elaborate kinds of queries that we could never, is the people who make ComicBase, we could never guess where you're going with the whole thing. And the only way we could really give you the powerful, power to do these kind of strange things is to more or less give you what amounts to a blank window on, if you know SQL programming, a way of just more or less typing in an SQL select clause and SQL order by clause, which are the primary tools you have for getting data out of a SQL database. We're more or less just exposing that to you to get to those things. We give you a couple little tips, a couple little shortcuts like the field list, which help you on your way. But it's as close to, unfortunately, living our sad life as you'd ever want to get. The bad news is you're living our sad life with all the attendant hassles of that. The good news is you can do any of the weird stuff that we can do. So that's the thing. It's worth looking into at some point. All right, let me quick check of the chat. What about using memory cards instead of discs? Yeah, I go back to that one here a second. Yeah, we did look at distributing ComicBase on USB sticks. It just didn't wind up being cost effective. In order to get 128 gigabyte USB sticks that were in bulk, that were actually going to read in people's drives, it was going to wind up still making the product much more expensive than we wanted to get to. I'm not saying we would never do that, but for right now, it became complicated messaging. One thing that's nice about the 4K Archive Edition, you notice that we call it the 4K Archive Edition now instead of the BluRay Archive Edition, because we want to get away from that explicit branding around BluRay, because most people who actually get it these days aren't even ever getting the discs anymore. They're simply downloading the stuff, but we have to keep it so it would fit on the disc if you had it. But one thing that we have going for us is it's almost like the same idea that you have with a high def photo. Like people understand what a high definition television is, or what an ultra high definition television image looks like, and what that what you can kind of expect from that image. And that's a better branding thing, I think, to talk about than to talk about like, oh yeah, it's a 40 by 3820 by 1920 resolution. It resonates with people more because they're used to thinking about their TV that way, and unfortunately that also ties people to thinking, and so when I stick in a Blu-ray disc, that's more or less the image quality I'm trying to buy, and so they get that. Sticking in a USB stick I don't think has the same resonance, and it's more expensive at the moment. Now that isn't to say never. Like I say, we keep looking at it, and we keep watching the prices, hoping that they drop to a point where it becomes a compelling alternative. It hasn't gotten there yet, but it's something we definitely look at. Yeah. Agent DeCamp says SQL equals sad, quiet life. I can't believe I've actually said that, but that is actually true. And Steve Dassinger, aka Stealth DBA, points out, yes, with advanced find, you can also add to what I said. Say find quantity stock greater than 1. If you simply said and I.quantity stock greater than 1, it would show you issues you own with missing covers. So I'll go ahead and show that over here. And I'll go ahead and choose it from the list here, just so you know you don't need to remember all these fields right here. is greater than 0. So if I say this, then it'll show me issues I've got that somehow I don't have covers for, which this is just sad if this happens, because if this happens, this means that, well, in this particular case, what it means is that this is a database that hasn't had a chance to look at these titles to figure out whether I've got them at, but it also points to these are titles that we should have scanned when we had the chance and somehow didn't get around to doing. So these are all on me if I have them in stock and didn't get to them. But anyway, another thing, and this is worth pointing out as well, because we're taking advantage of something it's a little bit of an indirect aspect of this whole thing. Like I say, we don't actually database the picture in the database ourselves, so we're not really asking for directly, you know, the question we really want to ask for is, what do we have pictures for on disk? And we can't really ask that one. What we can ask is, has ComicBase ever seen a picture for this disk, for this particular image, which is a slightly different question. And where that shows up is, and this is a great example of it right now with the live stream copy of my own database, is this database hasn't traveled through the install of all the pictures like my real database has. This is like a lame copy of my real database. In order to bring them into sync with each other, what I would want to do before I did this query for real is I'd want to go here under the File menu, go to File Tools, go to Rebuild Lists, and have it rebuild the pictures list. And this will take a couple hours, but what this will do is it'll force it to go to every single image in the, every single item and every single title in the database and look for a picture. And if it finds one, to update those fields that we're going to now say, hey, are they still blank? And if they're still blank, then we know it's missing the picture. So that's an important point to bring up, and hopefully I'll be clear about that if the subject ever comes up again. All right. So I want to start moving toward the door on this one. A couple other questions that came up, but let me do a quick check of the chat. Any idea why the most current update log would be blank other than the date timestamp? So if you're talking about the update log, there's an update log that happens when you do internet check for updates. And what it's going to do, and it does this individually for each database, is it basically makes a log as it goes through of what has changed between this time you did it and last time. And so that's what you're seeing when you see what's new, is it's going to the update log for, and this is the Livestream Pete's database right here. And so this is what just changed when I updated it just now. Now, if this is blank, one of two things probably happened. One is if you've updated the same database twice in a row, well, guess what? Nothing changed, right? Because the update log only captures one moment in time for the database. It doesn't keep, when you go to the most recent, you can go to this logs folder over here. Actually, the logs folder is kept in a not particularly obvious place. I believe it's the app data folder. But it's, look at up here, it's the, good lord. Yeah, so if you look at this folder that we're looking at up here in the, at the window up here, and I take it back, it is actually your documents folder inside human computing, inside the ComicBase name of your edition, and inside there is log files. If you were to look inside that folder on your drive, then you would see all the logs for all the updates that you've done. But if you look at the most recent one, it's only going to say what's the difference between the last time you updated and this time. So if you update the same database twice in a row, there will be nothing to show because it's going to look exactly the same as it did last time. So wait until you've got something new. Another thing is worth noting is for me to show this file, and this is an HTML file. You can open it up with anything like a web browser or something like that. There is a quirk of Windows where if you say, please open this file on my disk, which just happens to be an HTML file sitting in this particular log folder, if I didn't have any other web browsers open at the time, it would go straight to it and everything works great. No problem at all. If I had it open already, or if I had another one open already, and I go and I choose the same thing again, sometimes, depending on your browser, it brings up the log. depending on your browser, again, it might also bring up a blank window. So close your, I'm using the Brave browser right now. It seems to be, doing a pretty good job of this. I have seen other browsers where if you've already had the browser window open, it simply brings up a blank window. So close your browser windows before you hit see what's new, and then see if it doesn't pop up for you. All right. Let's see here. Oh, thank you. ERB says, please don't forget my earlier question about collection value graphs and how to accurately run and interpret these reports. So let's go ahead and have a look at this collection value graph on this one right here. All right, so this is the collection value graph on my collection. Now, this is my live stream collection, which is not super illuminating, because this is a copy of my collection I made back in April, which changes really only by however much I happen to have. Well, it's really it only changes by the price fluctuations in the database as it goes. Now, each of these little points along here is a distinct time when it generated a value update, and it does this every single time you do a check for updates. It evaluates your collection, stores it off maximum once per day. So if you had one earlier in the day, and so if I had one on 1/11/21, and I do another one later in the day on 1/11/21, the second one just overwrites the one from earlier in the morning. But done at large, this gives me a list of how this is doing for my collection. Now, you can choose which things show up on the graph. This top line over here is the value. I can turn things on or off, and if I do that, it also might condense my my lines to ways that make a little bit more sense. The red line over here is cost, and then this is how many items were in the graph right here, which you guys might notice that some of these things are related to each other, some of them are not. So like the number of items is, you expect it to float along. Like if I dropped 20,000 items out of my collection, I would expect the value and the value to go down at the same time, as well as its list price for what's left. But one is counting numbers, the other one's counting values. So that's a thing. Now I can control whether I'm going to show part of the what the time period is. So this particular database, the earliest that it had of data points in it to even look at was back from July 20th, 2020, and it'll go up to and this is the update that we did today, just now. You can't go forward, you can't go behind your earliest update, and you can't go after your latest update, because these are really just items that are stored in the database table, which is a summary. It's a précis of your database's value at that given point in time. It's not. Remember, up until just moments ago, when we started having the mobile app start changing up, that we actually starting to pay attention to what your inventory is when you send it to us, when you back things up to our cloud. One of the big features of the mobile app just now was that in ComicBase 21.0.2, we will actually, when you save a copy of your database, we'll actually make a copy of the relevant data from your database in a database we can get to, so that we can serve that back to you when you ask for it on the mobile app. You want to say, well, what Tomb of Draculas do I have? And so what you're seeing is a copy of that extract we made in our database table that we present in line with our master table. You're seeing that information reflected back to you as you go. Up until a couple months ago, we never gave a crap what you had in your own database. I mean, we would generate some stack reports out of it, and then we never looked at it again. Now, we still don't look at your data. We process it into a table, and then all of us sit here and get deeply uninterested in it, with the exception of tech support type stuff. We don't mine your data or do anything like that with it. But we at least are now storing it in a way that our database can get to. Before that time, before 2 months ago when we started doing this just to make that feature of the mobile app work, we didn't know what you had, and so we couldn't tell you how it had been reflected in market activity. I suppose it's now possible, should we decide to make this a feature of the program going forward, that once you started giving us your data, we could start telling you at large what your collection's been worth as the market goes on, whether you update or not. At this moment in time, however, your data you're basically the only person who really knows what you've got, and it's got because you're taking the market data that we give you and smooshing that into the database at one given moment in time when we generate that little data point there at the top of this graph that you can look at. But beyond that, we don't have any kind of big encyclopedic knowledge of your collection. So keep the expectations for what this report is. I guess know that that's how we're viewing the world. Is that we more or less look at this as something where we don't own your data. You own your data, and so we can't provide you the God's eye view of your data over time that owning your data would have given us. But this definitely gives you, as long as you proceed to update your data regularly, it gives you the God's eye view of your data's history during the time that this feature has existed. And this feature has existed for I guess we're coming up on our 9-month anniversary about now. So that's why all the graphs start around there, and that's why they end where they end. I hope that explained it. All right, Greg wants to remind everyone, reminder, we've dedicated a thread on this ComicBase message board. We can request demos for topics, absolutely. And let's see here. And I said, how come Pete hasn't given you a wrench as a moderator? What's a wrench? I have so much to learn about streaming still. I'm sorry about that, guys. And we're on testing for Shopify. Honestly, it's something that we're kind of turning our attention back towards right now. We have some... we're a little short-handed this week in the office. We have some key folks who are out right now. We hope they're able to return to active duty. Get off the disabled reserve list soon because they handled a lot of work, and so we're scrabbling awful hard to fill in for them. But anyway. But that's for that. He did it for the message boards. Got it. I as far as moderator in the chat, the way that this chat is working right now is it's like just right here on my YouTube channel. I'm hoping to actually do a test of StreamYard, at which point I believe I'm allowed to have mods come in and help with some of the stuff, which would really help a lot. So in which case, yes, there will be wrenches dispersed to the right folks if that happens. Honestly, I've been struggling just to keep my head above water this week, so yeah, not a lot of new stuff has happened on that front. Okay, so other things going on. Wrenches, yes. Thank you for all the mods. Official or unofficial, man, we appreciate you guys. You can't believe it. Okay. All right. Last thing I wanted to talk about just before I bail. Actually, I'm gonna have to. I think we'll have to call time on this one. But I did want to talk next time. I've got a couple other questions people have asked about how do we handle variants beyond issue number 26 or variant number 26, and also we had some interesting talks this week about Kickstarters and how best to start incorporating information about that market into ComicBase, because I do believe, especially with the distributor woes that are going on, that I think things like Kickstarters, Indiegogos, and so forth are going to be a more and more important place that people are publishing their books at, and I think it'd be really great if the comics, the folks who index and cover press and do things like that for the comics world, if we want to keep this world together, it'd be really good if we started broadening our coverage to encompass these other channels as more first-class citizens, as opposed to that weird thing that guy did over in the back room, which we found some copies of laying around on the front conference table, which is kind of the motive for how Kickstarters appear in things these days. If it goes right now, if things go through a major distributor like Diamond, they appear in catalogs and all sorts of other material that is much easier for us in broadly concerned the comics press to ingest and put out as coverage to everyone else in the world, whereas everything else tends to be very fan-based or catch as can catch. And I don't think that's going to do it going forward. I think those things are going to be huge and exploding areas of the comics world, and I think we need to step up how that's done, working with the folks at Kickstarter and Indiegogo to make sure that the comic creators get the publicity they deserve out of things, really as they're in development. But we had some ideas on that. We'll want to talk more about that next time, but we'll hit you then. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to call time on it now, but thanks again. If you haven't done so before, please do hit the like and subscribe, and we'll hit you on we'll hit you on the flip side. Yeah, I meant to do this whole thing with like, hey, hep cats and swinging chicks. It's like, I meant to be all hip daddy-o with the whole thing, and somehow I lost the whole oeuvre before I set out to start the party. Anyway, guys.